Hey guys, welcome to the Game of Fintech podcast. This week, I'm your host, Nicole Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of Socialise and head of digital at Finura Group. And my other host is Danni LeGrande, and Danni is partner at Finura Group and knowledgeable all things advice software. And we're really fortunate this week to have Rebecca Engel joining us as guest. And Rebecca is Director of Financial Services Industry at Microsoft, as well as Non-Executive Director at the RegTech Association. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to have you, Danni.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here, Beck. It's really great to have you. I'm super excited to be talking to you today. I think we probably had similar career paths in that we've started off in financial services and wealth management and ended up in technology. So I'm really keen to hear a little bit more about that and your path so far and how you ended up at Microsoft.
Well, well, before you get started, I'm just going to say we've got 45 minutes to get through for a lot of stuff, but we want to talk exactly about that, a bit about your career and definitely from a female perspective in terms of financial services and technology and what that looks like, but also, your vast experience in advice and then what it looks like, looking at financial services a little bit, back from a technology perspective now and how you see the world. And so Danni's going to fire the questions and I'm just going to interject when required. Over to you, Danni.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about where you started, Beck.
Yeah, thank you. So look, so thanks so much for having me, and it's a real honour to come and talk to you guys. So I've had 22 years financial services experience, and then I made that big decision to leap into Microsoft, which that was a pretty big and interesting decision. But interestingly, I didn't see a different pathway, to be honest. So throughout my career, I started my financial services career. I actually started at CommSec. I started trading at CommSec back in the day in 98, 99. When the stock market had just opened up to retail investors, we'd gone online. So that was an incredible opportunity to see markets, but also the advent of how tech was actually driving markets and how customers were beginning to really truly understand how to invest. I used to do these roadshows around, so there's 4 asset classes, there's equities, debt, and one day I remember someone put up their hand, what about stamps? That was interesting. It's not actually an asset class. It was another time. But yeah, I then spent some time at CommSec and Commonwealth Bank. I then went to AMP and Challenger. And then I landed at NAB, and I was really lucky at NAB to have some really good leaders and be offered the opportunity to have a number of senior leadership roles. And then following NAB, I went into QBE and I ran their underwriting agencies business for a little while. And due to my experience at NAB around regulation, they asked me to stand up their regulatory change program following the Royal Commission as well. So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to financial services. I've worked across most categories in financial services, but the two things that stand out for me in what I'm passionate about is I'm really passionate about an individual's financial wellness. And I'm also passionate about being able to tell people that it's going to be okay when things go wrong. So that has kind of lent me into that financial advice category and superannuation, but it's also led me down the insurance pathway as well. So that's what I'm passionate about. And then the reason I've probably gone in those directions and the choices that I've made have been about, I really want to solve really interesting conundrums, and they could be business conundrums or they could be team conundrums as well. So the role I took, my last role at NAB was the General Manager of Advice Services there, and I did that role for nearly 3 years. And the really interesting conundrum there was, how do you get a really big team, challenging team, really lifting to the level that they needed to lift for at that time? And I remember, some of my leadership team, who I still think were the best leadership team that I was able to work with and lead. We always used to talk about champions lifting. We wanted to champions lift, but that was sort of my pathway, looking for interesting problems to solve for. And then when I left QBE, I was looking for something. I recognised that if I want to continue to solve really big problems, I needed to have a much greater level of understanding of technology. Technology is the answer, right? Any problem we have to solve going forward in financial services, the answer is technology. There's no other answer, right? So I felt I needed to spend some time at a big tech or at a tech firm, and thankfully Microsoft came a-calling. And I'm doing this really interesting blend role of having to bring industry insight to the table for both Microsoft and our customers, but also in a tech firm as well. So it's a really nice blended role that will hopefully set me up for another couple of years and get through private school fees.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a career. That is a really great career, and obviously a really deep understanding of what goes on in our industry and the challenges we face. So that's awesome. So why do you think technology adoption is difficult in Australia? Do you have any thoughts around why we're potentially a little bit slower to adopt technology or embrace innovation? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think we can't look at financial services in a blanket way in Australia. I think certainly some of the customer-centric applications we get in banking are probably world-leading. They're probably world-leading. I think that our general insurers and probably our life insurers need to step up. Their global competitors are doing some incredible things when it comes to IoT or Internet of Things and being able to ingest really interesting data to be able to find new markets and new opportunities or to create greater levels of operational efficiency. What I think the challenge for Australia is I think we have a really there's a couple of things, and they're all there's a lot of intersection at play here. We have a really tough regulatory regime, right? I think that's the first thing. And I'm not saying that it's bad. It's tough because we are, but our regulatory regime is such that it's meant to keep people safe. But we do need to probably move to a principles-based approach rather than a rules-based approach. And I'm going to be really interested to see the results of the advice review coming through. I'm going to watch that like a hawk because I'm hoping that will start freeing up some ability there. I think we have a capital problem. I mean, we are, the organisation that is probably the most tech advanced in the country is the biggest because they've got the money to do it, right?
Yeah.
I think we do have a capital problem. I do think we have a capital problem when it comes to finding the right tech and developing the right tech. Now, that's not to say that certainly during the pandemic, there were so many organisations, so many fintechs went from startup to scale up. But the next step is going to be to genuinely make an impact. So I think we have a capital problem there. And then the other thing I think is, that's the third, so regulation, capital, and then the third thing is I think we've been a little bit behind. Certainly some of the larger players have been a little bit behind in thinking about a digital ecosystem approach. So certainly Microsoft, we have the largest partner network of all the big tech players, which means that if you buy our gear, it's really easy to integrate with others. I think that integration concept is really important. And that's not only important to develop the industry, but also to get a really good outcome for the small business players that I think, really, really need that assistance because integration just costs so much money, really.
Yeah.
So how would I summarize that? I'd say reg, capital, and ecosystem integration challenges.
And I think that, really touches on probably the crux of it. It's certainly at that the licensee and maybe smaller licensee level and practice level, that this ability to plug and play with other systems has been held back by a range of variables. I think software, I think rules, I think, guidelines within certain organisations, and I think it has limited the efficiencies of practices and their ability to decide their own future, and maybe even not see what's right in front of their face. If we look at, say, a Microsoft and what they're using for so much of their business, that they could potentially using for other parts as well.
I think the one other thing I should add is data, right? So certainly, and I'm not here to sell things. So we are coming to market with a solution that is around retail banking at the moment, and at its core is a common data model, and that is going to make integration so much easier. Flip over to the wealth environment. What is that common data model to make that integration easier and more cost effective for the licensee network that we have in Australia?
Yeah.
I think I put that call out as what's our data models actually look like.
Yeah. It's a good call. And I think integration is such a buzzword at the moment, and we haven't integrated well in up to date in our technology, and I think it's really important to just sort of touch on why integrating and having the ability to integrate is so important. And obviously it gives you choice for what you want to use in that in that ecosystem of applications that you want to integrate into your business. And there's lots, as we know, lots of really cool tools out there when it comes to managing your workflow and client engagement and all that sort of stuff. So but things like double keying is a massive deal, and I don't think we sort of give that enough attention, especially for our our admin teams that are sort of trying to run businesses from the back office on a day-to-day basis. It's a really important thing to note. I think that integration needs to be progressed, I feel, with technology in Australia.
I agree. Because it cuts out cost. It cuts out cost. It cuts out time. All these things that need to come together. It's vital for the success of the industry, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think there's even, to Danni's point, there's compliance issues in there. In terms of the data being correct or not correct, and there's also client service delivery in terms of the data potentially being correct when it's moving through different systems, or incorrect because it might get corrupted or it gets changed or it goes to different fields or whatever it might be, that this is now creating extra work at the practice level. It may even, there's certain systems that create duplications, and of course that creates problems. There's all these things, and so all of a sudden what was supposed to be simple and giving a practice a better outcome has just actually created more work for them, which then hinders these scale-ups getting any further, because they've got funding to get where they get and they're potentially a great idea, but unless you get some sort of cut through at a certain market share to get your product to the next level, and if advisors are too scared to do it, or it's going to take too much time, or you've got one shot at it to get it right, then that potentially stops their scale when we've got such a small market as well. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump back again to your to the career side of things, and I think it's also really important to sort of talk about technology as a career path. It's exciting and interesting, and I think a lot of the time, technology is, we sort of know the stats around this, that we've got 30% of women working in technology. So, I think there's a lot of interest in it, but I sort of feel sometimes that technology is seen as we're sitting in a back room, programming things and developing, and that's all technology is. But really, technology, to your point earlier, it's helping solve a conundrum, and it's also has a nurturing side to it as well. You are trying to help people do things better in a different way. What are your thoughts around how we can potentially sort of lift that uptake, and how does Microsoft, encourage that sort of progression with females in particular?
Yeah. So I think about, so the first thing is I would think about, so there's probably about 20%, 30% of women in tech. And what we also know is that women of that 20%, there's probably what you would define as the architects and the technologists. You've got about 20% in there. And then you've got people who work in sales or corporate in tech. You're probably looking at, say, 40 to 50% of representation of women in that scenario. And also, like other professional industries, there are more women coming through in the younger years versus, say, my age and older. Those of you who are playing along at home, I'm 44, I'll be honest. Clearly that. It gets smaller as you work yourself up the chain, like most other professional industries, if I'm honest. So certainly Microsoft, clearly because of its brand, is attracts and we have programs around STEM and graduates and so forth, like many other organisations, and we take it quite seriously. Diversity across the board at Microsoft is absolutely critical. I would argue that it's even more critical than a lot of other things. We almost over-index on talking about diversity and diversity of all types, which is really really crisp and really interesting. When I think about our customers, and I, in my role, I speak to customers all the time about these sorts of challenges, and they're really curious about me and my decisions that I made. And I've shared that with you. Business leader for a long time, recognised I needed tech. And so I talk to them, and they recognise that they need to uplift skilling across the board. It's not just the tech cohort that need to be skilled, but it's across the board from everywhere. Any individual needs to be uplifted with their knowledge of tech. Now, whether that's becoming someone who can do low code, no code work, or just don't even have the language to understand what it means to be tech-enabled. Even the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, in 1994 said, he said that banking, I'm using banking here, banking is essential, but not banks. Yeah. Even in 1994, we recognized that we are going to have to shift. And so when I talk to many of our customers, they recognize they need to become digital. They need to tilt the conversation internally, and the skills that they need to hire are tech skills, not necessarily to sit in their technology team, but they need, and I'm making this up here, but they need their general manager of, member experience to understand technology. Yeah. They know that they need their general manager of risk management to understand tech. They know that, and that's a challenge for them today. So it is becoming more and more pronounced with our customers at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's been highlighted during COVID. I think there were certain industries that were far more tech-enabled prior to COVID, but I think, when everyone had to, quarantined at home and had to then swiftly move their business to a place where they did have to use technology for all sorts of their businesses. I think, one, it's moved them from, potentially an A to, an A little bracket, like they're not quite a B yet, but I think they've moved forward. And I think potentially that it's, for some women, it's made them feel like that they can stay within some businesses if they have, and it's not necessarily if you've got kids. I think there's a lot of women generally who want to balance in life. They want to be able to exercise. They want to be able to walk their dogs, whatever it is. And they opt out of some of these senior roles because they don't want to, they don't have necessarily someone at home, fulfilling their role, or they're going to have double the work when they get home, or whatever their situation is. And so I think this now pushing businesses to a point where needs to be more tech enabled, and potentially having a balance of working from home as well as in an office might see more women moving into some more of these senior roles within a lot of industries, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agreed. And we, naturally, because of what we do, we have a lot of these conversations about hybrid work. And the conversation we're being asked to have a lot with across the board is how do you get that hybrid work model working? But what it's really determining is when you physically come to the office, people will need to redesign the purpose of the office.
Yes.
So you come to work for collaboration, you come to work for a particular purpose, and then you go home for another purpose as well.
Yep.
That adage of work is an activity, not a place. We really need to think deeply about how that works, and it will be different to different industries and different job types.
Yeah.
But that you've got to start with the thing that work is an activity, it's not a place. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not just you're not just to appear there, and you're not going to just turn up and leave at a certain time. It's to do the thing that you are coming together to do, and having other ways that you are, I guess, interacting with the work that they need to do, and managing or whatever it might be, and depending on the different roles. But yeah, I definitely see things evolving, and it will be interesting to see over the next 5 years whether some of those diversity stats change for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the middle of the pandemic, so end of 2020. Yeah, where am I up to?
I know.
End of
2021 or something. Yeah.
When I went and spoke to executive leadership teams and boards, I would say that most expected things to go back to normal, inverted commas. I think that has shifted.
Yeah.
However, I will say there is and this is, segment size of my observations, right? There is definitely an age view around let's just say the older the board member, the more they expect things to go back to normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
to go back to the way it was.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But, segment size of one.
I think that's really interesting too. I think that's interesting how you position that. What you do, we need to redefine what we do in the workplace versus what we do in the physical workplace versus what we do in our homes. That's a really good way of looking at it, because you're right. It's sort of, having that physical contact with your colleagues is really important. We can only do so many team meetings a day before we start to feel drained. And I think we all sort of feel that was great at the beginning because we could all connect really well when we were all locked down. But I think that's a really great lens to look at how to redefine work life going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think low unemployment rates are only going to continue to drive that conversation, and those board members who may have that view are really, going to be unwrapped from that pretty quickly when the businesses can't retain staff if they don't. I mean, you can just even hear the radio ads now where they're talking about, we give you 9-day fortnights or, 5 weeks holiday or 6 weeks holiday, whatever it might be, because everyone's having to do something to attract people, which means they're having to do the same to retain people.
Yeah, and I know everyone's listening to this now will have the same thing. The skills shortage is real.
Yeah.
It's a real problem across the board.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we have the same problem. We've got the same
Yeah,
problem.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just wanted to talk to you now about where you see Microsoft sort of slotting in even more into financial services and the way that we do things. As we sort of talked about earlier, we're all using Microsoft every day. It's embedded.
Everyone's our customer.
Yeah, that's right. We're your customers already. What are your thoughts around how we can sort of start integrating that a little bit more into our advice businesses?
Yeah, so, for a long time, Microsoft, we just sold you product, we just sold you and let you, depending on what we sold you, we'd let you integrate it. We'd let you configure it, whatever it needed to be. It's not just PowerPoint, we'd let you do that. But what Microsoft is doing now is tilting, what's known as tilting more to industry. So we are gradually becoming more, for ourselves, more customer centric. So hiring me is an example of that. We're becoming more and more customer centric, which will also mean that we become more and more orientated around the needs of our customers. And so what you will start to see from us is genuine solutions rather than product being coming from Microsoft. What does that really mean? I alluded to earlier, you know, we're about to sort of launch properly into market some solutions around retail banking, which has a common data model, and some predefined applications with dynamics and power apps around certain baseline, you know, regular things that you do in banking, like opening a bank account and all those sorts of things. So certain compliance aspects. But I see that Microsoft will do more and more and more of this. Now, what does this mean for the advice arena? I think that what you'll start seeing from Microsoft is really a genuine push into spaces where we allow for great, as I was saying earlier, greater levels of integration and the ability to bring a partner network to the industry that would allow you to integrate in a much speedier way. And we've done this because we recognize that agility and speed is really important, so that we have those solutions ready for you to be able to pick up and run with, really. We are definitely keen to make sure that concept of agility and speed to market is available for our customers, whether they be the largest bank in the country through to one of the smaller licensees, because we recognize that agility in whatever way is necessary. So what we look for in our partners is that ability to integrate, that ability to work with us in a more agile fashion, because we know that's what our customers need.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really important to touch on security, you know, cyber security, and trusting, you know, partners that have those deep pockets and capabilities to protect data, and within a partner framework that's got that security built into it. And you know, I guess from a licensee perspective, that the RI advice court proceedings and how that has, I guess, you know, sent ripples through probably a lot of licensees, and knowing how to navigate that space, because I'm not sure there's necessarily a black and white answer for how they do that. It's choosing the right partners and trusting their capabilities.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Microsoft is that, you know, I learned we spend $1 billion a year on security, pretty much. Unsurprisingly, we get more attacks than most other companies. I could figure out the stats, but we spend upwards of $1 billion a year on security, and we clearly put that into everything that we do, because we recognise the importance of it. Tip for listeners: there is a great book written by our chairman, Brad Smith. It's called Tools and Weapons. I highly recommend it. Goes down this pathway. He is sort of the ethics and the security champion of the organisation. I strongly recommend it. It's a great one to read, to listen to as an audio book if you're clearly all podcast people, because you're listening to us now. But Tools and Weapons, Brad Smith. Do yourself a favour. It's awesome, but it really goes into how we at Microsoft think about security, and we think about ethics as well. So yeah, something to put on your ears.
We'll put a link in the show notes as well on the page. Yeah.
And I think cybersecurity is one of those other things that we're not sort of very good at adopting yet in Australia. We've sort of it's starting to get traction, and people are starting to take notice. But you know, in advice practices, we're still seeing documents being sent by email without password security, all those really basic things, you know, that are incredibly dangerous and ripe for data breaches and that privacy breaches and that sort of thing. So I think cybersecurity, it's a great point, Nicole. It's something that we really need to start to factor into our thinking when we're looking at our technology. in advice businesses.
And not necessarily to add on another layer of cost for advisors either, because we know it is costly, but where I think it's, you know, it's been smart as an industry in choosing providers who've already spent $1 billion on it, and it might not just be Microsoft, it might be other providers who've done the same, and leveraging their capabilities rather than it being have to be paid for at the practice level as well, or at a smaller licensee level. That there can be other solutions, and as an industry, we just got to be smarter about how we look at that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just going to be part of. It's just going to be part of what you do every day now.
Yeah, an expectation that it's already there, built in, and
because the customer has that expectation.
Yes,
they expect that they hand over. You know, and this is a conversation I have about data often. Is, you know, we're ingesting all this data as organization, and then we've got, you know, consumer data right and all of these things that. And the thing is that customers trust you with their information, but they also want to see value for it as well. So you have to respect that from them, and putting those security principles around what you're doing with their data is vitally important.
Yeah. Well, I guess a similar analogy is, you know, the credit card that you use with the bank, and you know that, you know, if someone takes money out of your credit card fraudulently, well, that's on them. You know, they check in with you and they recover it, or they have and so we rely on that. And I guess, you know, you're going to flip it for a client, rely on that with an advisor, which means they've got to then be choosing their partners well.
Just as well.
Yeah. And I think too, you know, so when we talk about client engagement and using technology to engage your clients, you know, again, that's something that's starting to gain traction. It's sort of starting to get a little bit more interest around it. However, it's only a really small minority of businesses that are really utilizing client engagement tools in their entirety, and, you know, that's the way that they interact with their clients outside of client meetings. So I think that is a really important point too, because client engagement tools, you know, will typically give you a more secure way of sharing documents with your clients. It's, you know, you've got the two-factor authentication factored into all of that process. Yep. It's a nice, secure way of doing that. Do you have any thoughts as to why we're sort of, you know, sometimes I sort of feel like advisors are worried that their clients aren't going to be able to use the technology very well, or, you know, that they'd prefer to pick up the phone and talk to them. What are your thoughts around that?
Great question. I've got a few thoughts on that. I think that we need to put to bed the age issue. I think we need to put that to bed, right? Like, just because someone's over 60 doesn't mean they can't use the internet or an app. Right? Yep. I think we've just got to put that to bed first. You know, during the pandemic, the ABA, the Australian Banking Association, worked really hard for customers who only had passbook accounts. They got debit cards out to them, and they worked together as an industry to do that in light of COVID, and that has had incredible uplift. Now, I know that's a card, but what I'm saying is that we've got to put that age concept to bed and help people, you know. I think that's the first thing, right? Yeah. Like, my dad's 72. He's probably more digitally enabled than anybody I know, right?
That's mum.
Although I did find his password file the other day. Anyway.
It's written out neatly.
Yeah. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that whatever you ask people for has to be used appropriately for security. They need to see value. Customers hate having to fill things in multiple times. If I've already given you something, I don't want to have to do it again. And I would be really clear about. I would do what I would focus on, if I'm thinking about the licensee environment, is do one thing and do it really well. Don't try to be all things to all people at the moment. If you've got the capital to do it fine. But I would do one thing and I would do it really, really well, is where I'd recommend people playing. Because you're not a bank, right? Bank is, you know, I have my app, right, for my bank. I do see it every day. be really clear about what you're trying to get out of your customer experience and do one thing or two things really well. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's what it's a really good point too. Be clear about your value proposition. What are your clients actually expecting of you? And you know, are you okay to sort of just keep doing what you've been doing, or are they going to be expecting a little bit more? Especially when we start to look at, you know, intergenerational transfer, you know, all that sort of stuff, bringing families through as potential clients and that sort of thing.
One thing I would say also is think about not only the customer experience online, and this might be one thing you do think about doing really well, but where's the collaboration space for you and your customer in this new environment, right? Where do you, so sure, Teams, Zoom, whatever, another one. Think about those spaces as well. Think about where you come together with the customer in a digital environment, but also think about when you're in the room with a customer now, how are you enabled in that room to get things done? So think about all of those places where you're interacting with a customer, whether it be in a digital environment, whether it be you're collaborating in a screen or not, but also how are you enabled when you're in front of the customer as well? And that's probably equally as important.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important delineation, because it's sometimes I feel like the industry associates digital with DIY, and it's not.
Oh, no.
It's a collaboration. And your example of moving passbook owners to debit cards is a key part of that. We can have a mindset shift, and we can move someone to a different way of thinking if we can collaborate and work with them. And, you know, I often have this discussion that if you want your clients to use more technology, you know, enabled apps or whatever it might be, you need to change your onboarding process with the client to help them move into that place to use it and show them how, and you'll have a far better success rate if you work with them versus say they won't do it or leave them to their own devices, you know. And so and I think that's also, if like we talk about robo-advice, where people have gone, oh, that's just DIY. Well, it actually works far more effectively when you work it in collaboration with some sort of advice or some sort of education, versus people won't do it on their own, you know.
No.
And so it's the same with technology. And I think, you know, that's where the shift needs to happen.
Yeah, for every licensee, what is your value proposition, and therefore what are the tech solutions that are going to be enabling that? And don't think of it as just your website, right? Like, how do you enable your entire business model to get the outcome?
Yeah.
Lots of change. All right.
It's good stuff.
Now, on this show, we always ask our guests for a prediction. So that's a prediction for the next 3 years in advice tech. So you got any thoughts? Any firm predictions?
3 years is
What's your crystal ball saying?
Or 3 predictions for the next year, whatever you think is
really period. So I think, my big call is, I think one of the banks will get back into, let's call it product distribution in an advice model.
Okay.
I don't think banks will ever own the product again. I don't think they'll ever own super, let alone life insurance. I don't think they'll ever own them again. Distribution and advice, I think you'll start seeing people start tinkering at the edges once the advice review has been completed.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the things that we'll see. Now, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, I'm yet to be convinced.
Okay.
We're clearly going to see more consolidation in the super space. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
I think that's going to breed. Now, but what I'm hopeful that will bring to the industry in a positive sense is better capital, to be able to, you know, a real inflection in capital. To be able to innovate more. I'm hoping that will happen. What we need to see is a what we need to see in this industry is greater levels of working together to the betterment of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean this is something that we're going to get the ACCC involved in, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think we need to see a more disciplined approach to what is the core problem, and leaders standing up and really playing a role in leading this industry, because it is so vitally important to our community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I nearly had a heart attack when Scott Morrison said he was going to allow everyone to take $50,000.
Yeah, I think we all did.
Like, I just feel like,
yeah,
it is so vitally important, this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really hopeful that in the next 3 years, we'll see some leaders stand up who can take responsibility for improving the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and getting it to where it needs to go. As you mentioned earlier, I'm on the RegTech board, and what's brilliant about the RegTech board is that it's actually not about competition. It's about growing the industry for it to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful of this industry that we're talking about here today does get that leadership and capital investment that it really requires, because it's so vital to Australia.
Yeah, that's an excellent call, and I think you're right when you think about it. We are quite siloed, aren't we, in our leadership in this industry? So we don't have necessarily a collaborative approach to attacking the problems that we're facing. So yeah, that's a great call.
Great. Well, Thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca. It's been great. We probably could do this for a few more hours, but
we'll just go and get it. We'll just turn it off. And we'll just grab it.
Go get it.
For a while.
Yeah.
We'll definitely we'll have you back again, I'm sure, like after the review, and the review closes Friday. So when things, come out a little bit later, it'll be great to sort of break that down again and see what happens. But thanks so much for joining us. And where is it best for people to connect with you online? Where would you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, if everyone wants to connect with me online on LinkedIn, just track me down. Really happy to. If I don't get back to you immediately, I will get back to you. I've got a long list, but questions, insights, just follow along with me. Occasionally put out a blog.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you,
Danni,
Rebecca. Thanks as always for your depth of knowledge, and it was great to have you on the show. And thanks to our listeners. You can head over to fanuragroup.com, check out what we're all doing there. The blog posts will be, the podcast episodes will be there, and you can find me at socialise.com, and we look forward to speaking to you on our next episode. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.